If they hope to start the season on time, the amount of things they are about to cluster into one group is pretty wild, to be honest with you. And on top of it, this is a league that's been notorious for looking and feeling extremely disorganized over the years anyway.
March 10th. That's the date. That's when everything either comes together or falls apart for the WNBA's 2025 season. And what most people don't realize is that even if the league and players shake hands on that date, the chaos is just beginning. We're talking about a logistical nightmare that could make this league look more disorganized than it already does. And trust me, that's saying something.
Let's get to this. March 10th, drop dead date. This is the date an agreement would need to be reached, not the date the ink has to be dried on signatures. To get to work, this date gives both sides less than 2 weeks from today to come to an agreement on revenue sharing, housing, minimum standards, roster construction rules, all of the other priorities the league and the players have laid out throughout the CBA process.
Let's be clear about what March 10th actually means. It's not the day signatures hit paper. It's not the day the deal is done. It's the drop-dead date for reaching an agreement in principle, a handshake, a term sheet. Because after that date, the dominoes start falling. And the first domino? Television broadcast slots. According to sources in broadcasting who spoke to The Athletic on condition of anonymity, networks need at least a few weeks to clear time slots and windows for early season games. No deal by March 10th means those TV windows disappear. They get filled with other content, and without television, this league doesn't exist.
It's important to note that in the time between the handshake and the agreement, everything would remain in status quo and the moratorium would remain in place that would prohibit free agency transactions. Furthermore, franchises couldn't trade college draft picks, so no one should expect too much news during this time. You also got to remember that you got FIBA qualifiers in there, by the way. On April 1, Portland and Toronto would receive the protected players list. All right?
Here's what happens if they actually get that handshake done on March 10th. Lawyers from both sides immediately start codifying every single detail of the agreement. Revenue sharing percentages, housing minimum standards, roster construction rules, every priority the league and players have been fighting over throughout this entire CBA process. That legal work takes approximately 3 weeks. 3 weeks of nothing. No free agency, no trades, no draft pick movements, complete moratorium. The league essentially freezes while attorneys argue over semicolons and subsections. So we're looking at roughly April 1st before anything can actually move forward. That's when Portland and Toronto would receive their protected player lists. The lists that tell these expansion franchises which players across the league are untouchable and which ones are available in the expansion draft.
Players list. All right, that's the players that the league, the teams across the league are going to want to keep versus the ones they're willing to let go in a draft. All right, so that would be April 1st. April 3rd through the 5th, the Final Four and National Championship. The WNBA wants to avoid scheduling major attention-seeking events during college basketball's marquee weekend.
Then comes April 3rd through 5th, the Final Four and National Championship for women's college basketball. And the WNBA is terrified of competing with that. They don't want to schedule any major attention-seeking events during that weekend, because they know exactly what happens when you put WNBA news against NCAA tournament games. The college ratings destroy them. It's not even close, so they're building their entire timeline around avoiding that competition. April 6th is when the expansion draft finally happens. Portland and Toronto get to start building their rosters, but that's 6 weeks from right now. 6 weeks before these two franchises that are supposed to start playing in May can even begin assembling their teams.
The pre-free agency period kicks off 12:01 Eastern on April 7th with a designation period. This is when teams extend qualifying offers to reserves and restricted free agents, as well as potentially apply the core tag to eligible unrestricted free agents. The WNBPA has proposed eliminating the core designation, but assuming it remains, this is when front offices will decide who their core players are. This period typically lasts 10 days, but it would likely condense to 2 or 3 days.
April 7th through 11th becomes the pre-free agency period. This is when teams extend qualifying offers to restricted free agents and potentially apply the core designation to unrestricted free agents. The WNBA has actually proposed eliminating the core tag entirely, but assuming it remains in the new CBA, this 4-day window is when front offices decide who their core players are. Normally this period lasts 10 days. They're condensing it to maybe 3 or 4 days maximum. Then immediately after that designation period ends, teams can start negotiating with free agents. Another window that's supposed to last 10 days but will probably get truncated to maybe a week. And here's the thing about that negotiating window. In the NFL, they call it the tampering period. But everyone knows the real tampering happens before the official tampering period even opens. The second that window begins, you see 7 players already signed to new teams. The deals were done days earlier. Agents and front offices don't wait for permission. They just make it look legal when the window opens.
So free agency opens, signings can be official. Free agency will involve more than 100 players. What makes me wonder, the 7th through the 11th period, well, I mean, surely these teams, I mean, in the NFL, they have what they call a tampering period. And honestly, the tampering period happens before the tampering period opens. Because as soon as the tampering period opens, you start finding out guys are signing.
April 12th, free agency officially opens. Signings become official, and we're talking about more than 100 players hitting the market. 100 players trying to find new teams or re-sign with their current franchises in what will be an absolute feeding frenzy. Agents working the phones non-stop, front offices trying to build rosters while also protecting players from the expansion draft. General managers making decisions in days that normally take weeks. The very next day, April 13th, the college draft happens. Teams are selecting rookies, while simultaneously trying to sign veterans and figure out their expansion draft protection lists. It's 3 major roster-building events happening essentially at the same time.
Other sports, I think the NBA does a pretty good job of it too. Make things very interesting. The college draft would be April 13th, and then that's wild because, check this out, 6 days later, April 19th, WNBA camps would start. April 25th, preseason games begin. By the way, less than 2 months from now. Less than 60 days from right now. Basically. About 60 days.
April 19th, training camps open. That's 6 days after the draft. 6 days for rookies to sign contracts, relocate to new cities, and report to camp. 6 days for free agents who just signed with new teams to find housing and learn new systems. 6 days for Portland and Toronto to integrate entire rosters of players who've never practiced together. Then April 25th, preseason games begin. Less than 2 months from right now. 62 or 63 days. Teams that might have completely new rosters will be playing exhibition games after barely a week of practice together. And May 8th, that's opening night for the regular season. The games that count. The games that fans pay to watch. The games that determine playoff seeding and championship aspirations.
So there you have it. I mean, just because they get an agreement, handshake agreement done, you got to wait 2 to 3 weeks before they can start conducting any actual business. And now we know the television broadcast, I guess they must have came to Adam Silver and said, look, you run the risk of WNBA games losing time slots now and windows to other sporting events. And Adam Silver was like, well, bleep it. We got to give a drop dead date now. No choice. No choice. No.
Let's put this timeline in perspective. If the WNBA and the Players Union reach a handshake agreement on March 10th, teams will have exactly 59 days to conduct an expansion draft, run free agency with over 100 players, hold a college draft, open training camps, play preseason games, and start the regular season. 59 days to accomplish what normally takes 4 months in a properly organized offseason. And this is a league that already has a reputation for looking disorganized. People call it Bush League. I've said before, it sometimes feels like AA baseball in terms of production quality and operational efficiency. There are AAA baseball broadcasts that look more professional than non-national WNBA telecasts. Even NBA TV broadcasts of WNBA games aren't particularly good. Now imagine that same organizational infrastructure trying to execute this compressed timeline without any mistakes. Imagine the potential for scheduling conflicts, contract disputes, roster confusion, and general chaos.
Losing time slots now and windows to other sporting events. And Adam Silver was like, well, bleep it. We got to give a drop dead date now. No choice. No choice. And the players surely have heard this as well. They don't sign a deal, they don't get paid either. Anything. Tell me what you think.
Here's what apparently forced the league's hand on setting that March 10th deadline. Adam Silver and the league office got word from their television partners. The networks basically said, look, if you don't have a deal done by a certain date, you risk losing broadcast windows to other sporting events. Time slots that are currently reserved for WNBA games will get filled with something else. Baseball, NBA playoffs, whatever content is actually available and ready to air. That's when the league had no choice but to establish a firm deadline. They had to tell the players' union that March 10th is non-negotiable. Not because the league wants to play hardball. Not because ownership is trying to pressure the players, but because their television partners are running out of patience and flexibility. And the players surely understand what's at stake here. No deal means no season. No season means no paychecks. No paychecks means no income from the league at all. Some of these players can go overseas and make more money anyway, but for many WNBA athletes, this is their primary source of basketball income. This is where they build their brands and their futures.
This is the date an agreement would need to be reached, not the date the ink has to be dried on signatures. To get to work, this date gives both sides less than 2 weeks from today to come to an agreement on revenue sharing, housing, minimum standards, roster construction rules, all of the other priorities the league and the players have laid out throughout the CBA process. Once a term sheet is in place, lawyers from each side would get to work codifying the specifics of the agreement, and the owners and players would have to vote to ratify it. It's unclear why this specific date was chosen by the league.
So where does this leave us? Both sides have less than 2 weeks from today to agree on revenue sharing percentages. They need to finalize housing minimum standards, they need to settle roster construction rules, they need to resolve every single priority that's been on the table throughout this entire CBA negotiation process. Then once that term sheet is signed, lawyers take over for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of legal review and document preparation while the league sits in suspended animation. No transactions, no movement, no news. Just waiting for attorneys to finish their work and for owners and players to vote on ratification. Then the sprint begins. Expansion draft, free agency with 100+ players, college draft, training camps, preseason, regular season, all compressed into less than 8 weeks. The margin for error is basically zero. One significant holdup anywhere in that process creates a cascading effect. Delayed free agency pushes back the draft. Delayed draft pushes back training camps. Delayed camps mean teams aren't ready for preseason. And if preseason gets pushed back, you're either starting the regular season with unprepared teams or you're delaying opening night and creating scheduling conflicts with television commitments. This is what happens when a league that already struggles with organizational efficiency tries to execute a compressed offseason timeline while also integrating 2 expansion franchises. Portland and Toronto are supposed to be building competitive rosters in a matter of weeks. They're supposed to hire coaching staffs, establish practice facilities, create team cultures, and develop playing systems in the time it normally takes to run a normal free agency period. The WNBA has been growing. Television ratings are up. Attendance is increasing. Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese brought unprecedented attention to the league last season. Expansion franchises in Portland and Toronto represent major markets and significant investment in the league's future. The momentum is real, but momentum means nothing if you can't execute the basics. And right now, the league is staring down a timeline that would challenge even the most professionally run sports organization. This isn't the NFL with decades of refined processes and massive support staffs. This isn't the NBA with unlimited resources and established infrastructure. This is the WNBA, a league that still sometimes feels like it's figuring things out on the fly. March 10th is 13 days away. 13 days for the league and players to bridge whatever gaps remain in their negotiations. 13 days to avoid a work stoppage that would devastate the league's momentum and potentially cost them television partners who are already skeptical about the WNBA's ability to deliver consistent value. The pressure is on both sides now. The players want better revenue sharing, guaranteed housing standards, improved working conditions. The owners want cost certainty, roster flexibility, and protection for their investments. Neither side can afford to let this timeline slip, because if they miss March 10th, those television windows disappear. And without television, there's no national exposure. Without national exposure, there's no sponsor interest. Without sponsor interest, there's no revenue growth. Without revenue growth, there's no way to meet the players' demands for better compensation and working conditions. It all comes back to that one date, March 10th, the day that determines whether the WNBA's 2025 season happens on schedule or descends into chaos. The day that tests whether this league can handle the organizational challenges of growth and expansion. The day that reveals whether all the momentum from last season translates into sustainable success or just becomes another example of potential squandered by poor execution. So what happens if they actually pull this off? What happens if the league and players reach an agreement on March 10th, the lawyers finish their work by April 1st, and teams successfully navigate that compressed timeline to start the season on May 8th? Then the WNBA will have proven it can handle adversity and complexity. It will have demonstrated organizational maturity and operational efficiency. It will have shown television partners and sponsors that this league can meet deadlines and deliver on commitments even under extreme pressure. But what happens if they don't? What happens if negotiations drag past March 10th, or the legal process takes longer than 3 weeks, or free agency becomes a chaotic mess, or teams aren't ready for opening night? Then all that momentum from last season evaporates. The Caitlin Clark effect becomes a footnote. Portland and Toronto's expansion becomes a cautionary tale, and the WNBA's credibility takes a hit it might not recover from. 13 days. That's what we're looking at. 13 days until we find out whether this league is ready for the next level or still stuck in the minor leagues. Tell me what you think happens. Do they get this deal done on time? Can they actually execute this compressed timeline without major problems? Drop your predictions in the comments because we're about to find out real soon.